How long should I wait for true change to happen in my partner? Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers.
We're therapists.
And we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin. Tyler, what up, man?
How's it going, Brannon?
I'm doing okay.
Doing okay. I missed out on the big trip this week, so I was wondering how that went for you.
Well, it sucked because you weren't there.
I'm sorry, man. Had a wrench thrown in the works, and so I missed out.
No, it was great. It was, just like it always is. So we go to Texas every year for kind of a brothers boys trip, and Tyler bowed out on us. So, but it was good. It was really good. So, I missed watching your wakeboarding skills, just turn on a little Blues Traveler and just let you go. Wow.
Blues Traveler. Wow. Brannon loves to, like, every time we go somewhere, UB40, and he puts on all of my high school music anytime I do something just to mock me. Yeah.
It's a beautiful sight.
I'm sad you didn't get your UB40 and your Young MC, man. My bad.
I turned it on just for you, but it wasn't the same without you there. So, but Jeff's the man. So visiting him's awesome.
Love him.
And, he said he listens to the show just to see if we mention his name in the first few minutes. So, Jeff, you're the freaking man.
Yeah. Now he's got to listen to this episode.
Yeah.
So,
well, should we get into it?
Let's do it, Brannon.
Okay. We have on the show with us Rachel. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
If you could give us a little bit of context and understanding what's going on with you, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I feel like this is a long story. I'll try to keep it concise. My husband and I have been married for 8 years. We were dating for 2 years before that. I was raised very much believing that pretty much like all men struggle with pornography and lust, and it's the woman's job to help them through that. And it's the woman's job to be modest and to honor the Lord. And by doing that, you'll help them through their lust. So that's kind of the background I'm coming from. I found out that my now husband has struggled with pornography since he was 12. I didn't know that when we got married. I did know he struggled with pornography in general. But a lot of the counsel I got was all men struggle with pornography. Once you guys get married and start having sex, it will go away. Mm-hmm. So that's what I went into our marriage believing, not knowing anything about addiction or any of this cycle. So it became really obvious to me really quickly after we got married that the pornography didn't go away and the lust and all of the issues with that didn't go away. And through a lot of gaslighting and manipulation from him and through a lot of our church leaders, I basically took a lot of the blame and was told, like, you need to be a more respectful wife, you need to be having more sex, you need to, XYZ in order to, like, fulfill the reasons he's, like, going to pornography. And I very much believed that. I was just like, wow, I am just like a really crappy wife. That's true. Or else this wouldn't be happening, because it wasn't happening with all my friends. Yeah. So my sister also passed away from cancer the first 2 years we were married. And so my brain was, like, completely just focused on her. And so anytime he would act out, or, like, just all the things that were happening in our marriage, I was just kind of, like, owned and was like, that's really hard. I need to be a better wife. But I'm also just so hyper focused on my sister that I can't really deal with it. So fast forward, I guess it was about like 4 or 5 years into our marriage, he just started getting more and more manipulative and, like, violent toward me. And he would start, like, punching the walls and throwing things and yelling at me, and just became a man that I was like, I don't know who this is. This is not who I married. And continued to think it was my fault, continued to try to be a better wife, that whole story. Then we had one final blow up. And my mom, I had never told my mom or anybody about any of this, because I was just, like, so shameful and so embarrassed, thinking that a lot of it was my fault. So then eventually I told her what was going on, and she was like, this is unsafe for you guys to be like living in the same house. And so we separated, and we separated for 7 months. And throughout that time, he just like still blamed me and was very victimized in all of it. And then toward the very end of the separation, he did come to some awareness and like owned some stuff. And said he was getting help and going to his men's group and getting therapy and all that stuff. And so he's my best friend. We have so much fun together. Like, I want a life with him. And I was like, awesome, you're owning some stuff. I'm going to just take that as good. So we moved back in. And then that was almost 3 years ago. And then about a little over a year and a half ago, we moved out to Knoxville, or out to Tennessee, because I thought, real change is happening. Awesome. This is kind of behind us now. And then slowly just started seeing some of the addiction and stuff coming back. Acting out was happening again. So this was about last summer. He basically admitted to me, like, I haven't had any real change. I need to change 90% of who I am. I haven't been working my 12 steps, just like admitted all this stuff. That's when I started getting into more serious recovery, started going to S-Anon and therapy, and just getting resources for myself, started developing a lot better boundaries. And then when I was back on the West Coast, he acted out again. This was in July. And one of my boundaries was, if you bring pornography into the house, then you can't be in the house. And so we're now separated. We've been separated for about a month and a half. And that's kind of where we're at now. And it just feels like this ruthless cycle. And I'm just pretty weary from it.
It can be pretty exasperating. You said you moved to Tennessee because you thought things were getting better. Was that like a job move or something? Or was that where he's from? Or
Yeah, so we're both from the West Coast. We were having infertility problems. And so we had considered moving to Tennessee for a really long time. And we were like, well, we're not having a baby. And we, there were some job opportunities. And so we were like, well, we're in a really healthy place. Like, let's just go try it out. I found out I was pregnant on our way out here.
Wow.
So now I have a 15-month-old daughter who is like my entire world. But has proven that a lot of that was just a facade. So
This last one, did you catch him? Did he admit to it? Like, how did that happen?
That's what's always been tricky about this. From what I know, he's always admitted when he's looked at porn or been, I don't know if it's called edging or what it is, but every time he like tries to find it or tries to scroll and see it, it seems like he'll be pretty honest with me. So I was in Oregon this last time, and he called me and let me know. And then I was like, okay, well, per our boundaries, I need you to move out before I get home. And he did.
So he didn't kick and scream. He actually did.
Yeah.
He just moved out this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
can I just ask you before we go any further, is there any current risk of any of the violent stuff anymore still?
I don't think so. He hasn't been violent toward me since our last separation. He is really violent toward himself. He'll still punch himself in the head and be like, he'll go in another room usually to do that, but it's still happening, but toward himself.
Okay, but since your other separation was about 3 years ago, there hasn't been like that intimidating behavior, throwing stuff.
No, just a little bit of yelling, but for the most part, it has resolved.
So I just want to kind of go down a list with you and just the answer to these questions, but just say it and check them off. So, is this problem, this issue that's going on with him and your marriage, and does it have to do with you being enough? No, it doesn't, right? You know that. Does it and when I say that, does it have to do with you giving him enough sex, or being fulfilling all of his needs or managing his lust or making sure that he, doesn't go act out or do those things, right? It has nothing to do with actually you.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a trickier question. Is the problem pornography?
No. I do know that. No.
Okay. Yeah. That's the symptom. It is a problem. It exacerbates it all. It fuels it all. It feeds it, but it's not the problem. So if it's not the pornography, then what is it?
I think that I know based off of all of our conversations, and I think for him and what he's admitted to me is he just has a lot of self-loathing and self-victimization and self-worth issues, and that's just like so deep-seated in him. And I mean, even we just had a conversation with my pastor because of our separation, and my pastor was like giving him some input, and automatically you could like see him slump down, see him just take that in. And my pastor was like, "What's going on?" And he was like, that's because I'm worthless. Mm-hmm. And he just like takes any sort of self-criticism as that. Mm-hmm. So I do know that's a huge part of it now.
What about Rachel on your side of things? Let's ask Brannon's question again. Like not what's going on for him. Why is it a problem for you?
The pornography.
The pornography, or if it's not about the porn, what is the problem for you?
Yeah, the pornography is definitely it goes against my value system. Definitely. It goes against what I feel like we agreed to in our vows. So that is a huge problem for me. I would say that the farther along we go in our marriage, the self-victimization and not being able to take any sort of input whatsoever from anybody has me just like walking on eggshells for any sort of, like, for anything. So both of those aren't okay with me.
Talk a little bit more about the walking on the eggshells part of it. What causes you to have to walk on eggshells?
Yeah, I think anytime, especially when it comes to finances, we decided I was going to be a stay-at-home mom when my daughter was born, and we've definitely been struggling financially. But we came to the point where we have separate finances because he won't talk about asking for a raise at work, asking for like constructive criticism so that he can get a better position. He just won't even go there because he can't handle that it might be negative input. And so we just agreed, like, I can't force you to try to make more money or get a better job. So I'm going to do my own thing financially. You're going to do your own thing, because that's the only way to have any sort of peace. So that would be like one example of the eggshells.
Okay. So if I was to kind of restate in some slightly different words, I just want to make sure we're getting this, that the porn use goes against certain parts of your value system in terms of what you believe about healthy sexuality or fidelity, things like that. That's part of it. But the other part of it is that you want to be married to a man who can offer and present strength and stability. And instead, because of the lack of shame resiliency that's there, it leaves you feeling like you always have to manage his feelings. It leads to feelings of being not stable or secure inside the relationship. And that's what the problem is.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, really well. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll say the same thing Tyler just said, just to like really see it, the whole picture here. You're in a relationship with a person with an attachment disorder. And what that means is, and it all feeds itself. It all fuels itself. So, he needs somewhere to feel okayness, so he can find that with lust. He can go there and escape all of it. But when he does that, he feels like all of the shame that he has about not being good enough and a failure and, not being man enough. That's all driven home when he goes there. So then he comes home to you and you're like, hey, did you ask your boss about a raise? And he grumbles because he already knows that he's like not good enough. And that's not your fault, right? But he crumbles, and so then he'll either gaslight or shut down or disconnect or fight with you, isolate, lack actual intimacy in his life, and eventually escape and find respite with his addiction. And his addiction manages all that pain, drives home the shame, and continues the attachment problems in the relationship. And so from the partner's vantage point, it's like, okay, then what do I do? Like, it sure would be nice if he'd stop this porn thing, but stopping the porn thing isn't going to resolve the shame, the attachment issues. And so as a partner, you take a step back, and you've probably been learning a lot in S&On about how to have healthy boundaries with him, how to hand his recovery back to him. Tyler and I talk about being on the shoreline and just watching to see if you're safe. We talk about walking across ice and being able to know whether the ice is thick or not by just observing, rather than being on the ice with him. And so can you see the full picture there, Rachel?
Mhm.
No?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think, I don't know, I'm really just struggling with like how that looks next steps, because we've been in this cycle for such a long time. I mean, we're going on 10 years now. And there are little moments and seasons where I'm like, awesome. Okay. I can tell you're like going to your group and you're going to your therapy, and it feels, we have some really healthy conversations, and he's able to get out of the victim mode, but it's just so short lived that I'm like, man, is this really, doesn't feel like real recovery, because I feel like that is just way more consistent than anything I've seen.
One of the things that keeps people trapped in this cycle. So good of you to come on, because there's so many people listening right now that are in a very similar cycle. And when Brannon was painting that cycle, the back end of the cycle is when he comes to you, and then he wants you to not leave him. So he either has to lie or deceive or get angry or manipulative or whatever else. And then a person like you who has a value system of wanting to stay through thick and thin, I'm here for you, ride or die. You got church leaders saying be a support to him, as you run the risk of then taking ownership for the things that only he can do to actually help move things forward in his life. And then that's that cycle that turns into like a 10-year thing where it's like, man, like I'm a bad person because I see his struggles. I see his lack of shame resiliency. I should be here to support him and love him no matter what. And so often there needs to be a recalibration of understanding what true supporting him really is.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to keep your values by supporting him through healthy boundaries, through expectation that there's going to be active change working on and happening. And then doing that for myself as I grow into my new self with my new boundaries, I'm inviting that change along the way, and he will either come along or he won't. Mm-hmm. And that's the scary, hard part, but that's a way to invite and support, not a way to cut him off and leave him. And I think that's where a lot of like people that we work with get in the position you're in. And I can imagine that if you were to consider moving that direction, there'd be all sorts of twisted feelings inside yourself on your values. And am I abandoning someone who's wounded and all of that other stuff? Go ahead,
Tyler. You just said what Tyler's saying, cutting off and leaving him. It doesn't mean you have to do that, but it means you have to be open to that is a possibility. Because if you're not, then you'll continue to sacrifice everything like Tyler's talking about. His attachment disorder will present to you one option, and that's come resonate with me here.
Stay stuck with me because I don't want to actually change, or I don't know how to actually change the fact that I can't handle my own shame.
Yeah.
Right. And what you're saying, Brannon, is like, I'm not saying Rachel should leave him. I'm saying she's gotta get to a spot where she could consider that the most loving thing she could do would be to not stay in the cycle anymore.
Absolutely.
The cycle can change, and if he changes with it, then they will actually grow into something new inside of their relationship, a new marriage. But if he doesn't, she will eventually grow to a spot where she'll either find peace with knowing that he's got no shame resiliency and she won't get sucked into it, or eventually it's like a tension on a string, like a rubber band. Eventually that rubber band will snap and she will be better off anyway.
Yeah.
Because she will have done the work to grow into who she really is without feeling guilty and terrible. Like she's, I mean, you could hear in her story, Brannon, that for the early parts of her marriage, she was taking responsibility for his problems.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work for anybody. It doesn't work for him to grow into his manhood either.
Right. Rachel, what are you thinking as Tyler's talking? What's going through your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it all makes a lot of sense, like on paper. Obviously, like emotionally, I'm trying to. I feel like I have gotten to the place where I have freedom, especially like freedom from the Lord to understand, like, okay, he actually isn't calling me into a marriage of abuse and of this cycle, and like that's not what he has for his daughter. So I do feel like I'm finally more accepting that. I think what I'm really afraid of is being premature and being unforgiving and being like, well, but what if like this is the actual time though? Like, what if this time is real and we could have like this awesome, beautiful marriage and friendship? Because like we are just such good friends, and like I do enjoy him so much, and so it's so hard to just be like, I'm not looking for an out, you know? Like I want to stay if recovery will actually happen. I don't know how to tell if it's actually happening because I've been in this for so long.
If he's going to get in real recovery, he's going to have to deal with the deepest pain and the darkest shame, the hardest trauma. There's a reason why his self-worth isn't there. That there's something underneath that. And if he doesn't deal with that, then he's not going to be able to hold space and create intimacy with you. But there are, like, I can get pretty exact with you in terms of what to look for, what to observe, what are you trying to see in him in terms of change. And this isn't overnight. This isn't like, hey, talk to Brannon and Tyler, like he better show up this way now. This is, you see these things start to happen in your relationship and it's like, oh, that's a little bit different. And because that's a little bit different, I can hang on just a little longer. And now that's a little different. And we call it the messy middle. But if you're in that messy middle, as he's making progress to actually loving himself and knowing who he is, that's fine. If he's reverting back and it's all phony and he's acting like he's doing these things, but he's not, that's where you have to come back to yourself and say, okay, what does my recovery tell me about me? Because he's asking me again to betray myself, to revert to this low level. Like, I'm going to be healthier than that. I'm going to love myself. So do you want to know what those things are to look for? Yeah. We have certain things, and Tyler will chime in here too. So, first and foremost is proactive in his own recovery, that he's self-determined and it has nothing to do with you. So you're out of town, you're not cracking the whip. Let's say you were divorced and that were the case. Would he still go forward and say, I'm doing my work, I'm figuring myself out? That's important. Because if he's doing it just from external motivation, meaning for you, it's not going to last and it's not going to create the change that we need. So that's one thing. Tyler, do you want to chime in? Do you want to add one?
Yeah, let's I mean, I want to back up for a little bit and then I'll add another one too, Brannon. I think a lot of people, when they get into recovery, they look for the tangible things to see that recovery is happening, right? And
like
so
sobriety.
And that's why we chased sobriety so much, because that is a tangible thing. And sobriety, theoretically, if you can manage sobriety and still continue to do your work, you are going to get healthier. So that's one measuring stick. So things like sobriety, or things like going to 12-step meetings, or things like, the logistical setting a therapy appointment, all of that stuff matters when it's paired up with what you just said, Brannon, that I'm doing this because I realize I have a problem. It's a big problem, and I'm responsible to manage this problem. If I am doing the logistical things so that my wife won't leave me, that's a totally different thing, because now the heart isn't actually engaged with the actual work. And that's where a lot
It's
of
a
partners,
manipulation.
yeah, a lot of partners get confused on that, because they're like, yeah, we're doing recovery. Like, and there's 3 years of sobriety, and and he's been going to group for like the last year and a half. It's like, well, has he worked any steps in group?
problem
or has he
is
done
the
any of his
shame.
assignments? Has he actually addressed the challenges he's been, like in our groups, we give challenges and assignments, and we can have a guy come to group for 3 years and do 0 assignments because he's too afraid to actually look at his stuff. Or we have a guy come in and, dive in and go, man, I got to go take a look at some of this shame and some of my trauma and some of these other things. Those kinds of things are things that you look for. So besides that proactive, self-determined, like, hey, I've got a problem and I got to go figure this out, then you get the logistical things. But inside the logistical things, what you're looking for is the adoption of certain principles that go along with it. Am I seeing a trend towards humility, accountability, proactive connection with other people? I'm the one reaching out without my wife saying, hey, you should make a phone call, or you should do this or that. Like, I'm the one who's now adopting those principles into my life. Connection with other people, wrestle with a real wrestle with God or higher power, which in your case, it sounds like is a big deal, because shame is preventing all of that right now in his life, because he'd rather go punch himself in the head than let God be God. Like that kind of a wrestle, you want to see and watch for that, almost like Brannon said, standing on the shoreline or just testing the ice to see how thick it is, but not going all the way out into the lake to see if he's gonna, because if you go out to try to save him out there, you're both gonna drown. Right. Sorry, Brannon. I'm a
No,
on
yeah,
a tangent.
Yeah, and you just listed off a bunch of them, those principles. Rachel, something you want to see is his ability, and this is really hard at the beginning, his ability to not take things personally and to hold space for you and for your pain. So to be patient and empathetic with your pain. And so like, when there's an issue and if he shows up just like a wet noodle and, he's, so sorry, blah, 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 like, or he shows up defensive, it's disconnection you'll feel, versus like, talk to me, tell me, like I can take it. I can feel your pain, because my shame doesn't need to defend from it. Like, I want to go deeper with you about what it's like for you. Now at the beginning, he's probably not going to be able to genuinely hold that space, but maybe just a little bit more here and there. And that's what you want to see. If you don't feel that at all or see that at all, that's a problem. It means his shame is still running the show. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. I think what I'm struggling with is he has had so many opportunities to show any of that. And like for a season or like some conversations he does, but then it just seems to just kind of go away. And like, especially with this last time, it seemed like he was being really healthy. He was showing up, he was doing his steps. Like he's on step 9 and, his sponsor, he just seemed like he was in such a good place. But then I'm trying to look back and be like, was he genuinely in a good place, or did I just want him to be in a good place?
Mm-hmm.
Because every Thursday we have kind of like a debrief of like, how are you doing? What's going on with you? After both of our meetings. And I would say almost weekly, he's confessing to me like, oh, well, I was, I was trying to find something, or like I was on Google Maps and like hoping that something would pop up, or just, it's just very consistently that way. And so I'm like, how patient do I need to be, and all that makes a lot of sense. And it's a lot for me to think about.
That's always the question. And really that comes down to your truth of like between you and God and your intuition. How long do I wait? How long do I just watch and see? And for everybody that's different. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. But for you to be really honest with yourself, for you, if drinking that bitter cup isn't fun, to get in alignment with your truths sometimes. So it's like, well, I'll tell myself that my truths are something different than they are, so I don't have to drink that. Versus like, I'm honest with myself about what my heart and soul are telling me to do here. And and maybe that means wait. Maybe that means go. Right.
I also wonder too, Rachel, this is a really difficult concept. And as you've kind of jumped into your own recovery, I'm sure you get hammered with boundaries talk all the time, right? But sometimes when we talk boundaries, we think of boundaries as black or white, all or nothing kinds of things. And then that feels like you're getting your hand forced when you're not ready to actually make a move on something yet. And what I would suggest is that sometimes you can be somewhat creative with how you use your boundaries so that you're not forced really quickly into having to like make a big black or white decision. And what I mean by that is like, I'll kind of give a little analogy here, maybe even a personal story with it. Have you ever seen those toys? They're like made out of plastic and they're like a ball that's like a couple inches, but then if you pull on it, they like expand out and they can almost become like 2 or 3 feet big. But then you press them and they can go back into being just a couple of inches and they can kind of compress and go out like that. That's kind of how I view boundaries work being sometimes, where it's like, if it's trending in the right direction, right, we're going to come closer and closer and closer. So if I'm sensing, and this is the trick, through the logistical things that he's doing, that's part of it, but I have to be sensing a certain energy through those things. If I'm sensing accountability, humility, proactiveness, that an effort to hold space, the practice of those shame resilient principles that we teach, compassion, curiosity, context, all of that stuff. If that's being practiced, I'm going to lean myself in closer and closer and closer. And then on a particular day, it's not being practiced. It doesn't mean, boom, we're done. It means, oh, never mind. I'm expanding myself back out again. And I need a little bit of emotional or physical distance and space for a couple of hours or a night or a couple of days or whatever it is that I need. And so my boundary ends up being commensurate with the same level of like whatever I'm feeling in terms of the changes that are happening. So I can flex and expand as much as I need to until eventually sometimes I grow so far out there that I finally get to that, I call it a surrender moment where it's like, oh, it's time. It's time. And for the women and partners that I work with that do it that way, when they finally land in that sort of like surrender place, it's almost like get this freedom. It's almost like even God says, well done. Like, do what you want now. You can stay longer or you can go. But now it's a choice that's made from groundedness and peace and strength rather than just exasperation and tiredness. And I'll give you an example in our own recovery journey. I struggled really bad with honesty. So even after like getting sober, I had the habit of just lying, like hiding stuff, deceiving, and so for my wife, the sobriety wasn't the big issue. It was that she never knew if I was being honest or not. And so there were moments with stupid things where I would lie. I'd lie about having gone out to lunch that day. She'd be like, I don't even care if you got out to lunch. Why did you lie about that? And that was when she would go, Tyler, I want to be in a relationship where there's honesty. I'm going to take the night off and I don't know when I'll be home. It'll either be tonight or tomorrow morning, but I don't want to be in a relationship where there's dishonesty. That would maybe go for a couple hours. That might go for a few days. And then she'd come back and say, hey, like, where are we at? And I'd say, yeah, I'm still committed to that. And then she'd start to kind of slowly lean herself back in until the next dishonesty thing. And then she'd be like, boom. And sometimes it was bigger. Sometimes it was smaller based off of that. There's no doubt in my mind my wife would have left me if I hadn't continued to grow into a more honest man. But it bought time for me to do that, and her boundaries were an invitation into that space to decide that that's the man I wanted to be. And if I wouldn't have made those decisions, we would be divorced right now. And that would have been better for both of us because I wasn't going to be what she needed in a relationship if I didn't make those changes. So does that make sense, Rachel? I'm doing a lot of talking. What's on your heart? What are you thinking?
No, that is such a helpful analogy, because I tend to be very black and white of like, okay, well, you did this, then that means I have to do this. It just, like a lot of rules. So that is really, really helpful, because I'm in the place right now where he's out of the house and I'm like terrified to let him like come stay in the guest room or have like an in-home separation, because then I'm like, well, because then I commit to him being back in and like I can't go back on that, So that's a really helpful perspective.
What's behind that? Is that your group? Like, you got to hold firm, you got to do this, you got to do that. Like, what's behind the black and white?
I think a lot of it is how I was raised, very much like rules, legalistic,
That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I know a lot of that has carried over into like how I make decisions in my adult life. And that's why, like, that's also why this cycle is so hard for me to navigate, because I am very much like, okay, you acted out, you looked at pornography. That means you're not in recovery. That means we need to be done, And then I'll like soften my heart and be like, okay, well, actually, maybe that's ridiculous. So that's another piece where I'm just like, if you're in genuine recovery, will you be acting out like ever anymore? Or is that too much to expect?
I have a lot to say here. There's a lot of directions to go. So like what's coming up for me is, Rachel, I feel like you need to awaken your inner feminine intuition. So that black and white rules, that's you stepping into the masculinity to protect yourself. Like, it's black and white. This is how it is. This is what we do. Versus like, women have this superpower of really deciphering truth through their intuition and feeling out things. And so your boundaries, what Tyler was talking about, at the root of a boundary is a value, is a value system. And sometimes your values contradict each other. I value honesty. He just got honest with me. I'm grateful for that. But I also value fidelity. So what do? Do I hug him or do I kick him out? Like, you see what I'm saying? And that's where your amazing feminine intuition can come into play of like, I'm going to fill this out right now. Like, in this moment, what works for me and for us? What's truth? I don't want to act in fear. I want to act in truth in this moment. And yes, I have these things set up, which is good to have them set up. But I'm also aware of this moment. I'm in the present moment, which is also a feminine trait. And because of that, I can really decipher what my truths are and what my boundaries are. Do you see the difference there? What I'm saying? But it's about trusting yourself, knowing yourself, and navigating that in those moments, which can be kind of hard. So,
Brannon, to go along with that, just using that example, I saw Rachel, you smile when you use that example, almost as if you've been there 1,000 times before. I don't know if I should thank you or be mad at you right now, because I'm glad you're being honest, but I value fidelity. Inside of that, having a boundary. So the boundary might be, if you act out, I probably want to value that fidelity, and I'm not really going to feel safe for a while. So I'm going to need some distance or space, right? Most people set the boundary like, if he acts out, then I'm taking 7 days off. It's like, no. That's not what Brannon's saying. When he acts out, I'm going to be grateful that he was honest with me. I could even articulate that gratitude at the same time that I'm going to need to take some space for as long as I need to get my feet planted. It's not the arbitrary number of 7 days. It's
not a punishment to him.
I'm going to be swimming in this for a few days, and I don't know if I want to be around him for a while I figure out what I want to do with this. So it might be a day, it might be a few days, it might be a week, it might be a couple of months. That's me getting space for what I need to get my feet planted to make my decisions. That's not me punishing him into sobriety. And it's not me like having to be the one with the hammer to say, well, I have to leave you now, because no, I've got to protect my values. I'm so glad you're being honest. I wish I could throw you a cookie for that, but like, I just still don't feel good about it. Like, it doesn't work for me. That middle path geared towards your values is what really matters. And that's what will buy you the time you need to grow into your decisions, instead of feeling like forced all the time one way or the other. So,
yeah.
Are we hitting your question, Rachel?
Yeah, that's all. It's just so much to think through, but it is so helpful. It's a new perspective for me. It's a more hopeful perspective, definitely.
I think another thing I just want to add is when we talk about these attributes of real recovery, we talk about honesty or accountability. Don't confuse disclosure for honesty. So yeah, I'm gonna tattletale on myself. I'm gonna tell you like, yeah, like let me use Tyler's example of going out to lunch. If I went out to lunch today and I came home and my wife was like, "Did you go out to lunch?" If I were to check in with my honest truth, I mean, I probably did because I do pretty much every day.
You're the king of eating out for lunch, Brannon.
Yeah. But with my honest truth, I'd probably tell her like, I could tell her I did. That's fine. But I'd probably also say like, hey, I want to be in a relationship where we don't have to check that out with each other. Like you can go out to lunch. I can go out to lunch. Like we're good. I'm not going to tell you when I go out to lunch, or I'm not going to disclose that, just so you know, and she might hate that.
But that's honest.
But is see the honesty there? So I'm not telling her what she wants to hear. I'm telling her what's true for me. And then hopefully I'm healthy enough and safe enough to hold space for that hard truth if that's hard for her. So you want to feel his strength. You want to feel his steadiness. You don't want to feel his, oh my gosh, I'm scared that I'm not loved and I need to figure out everything I need to do to either hide because I'm not loved or perform because I want to show you that I'm okay. If you feel those things, you'll be feeling left with like, ugh, it's hard to be close to him.
Let's use the example that Rachel used, Brannon, where they check in on Thursday or whatever after the meeting, and he's like, okay, so just so you know, I was looking on Google Maps to try to find something pornographic. Slap himself on the hand.
Bad boy.
Right. It would be actually more helpful to Rachel, and it would be more honest if he not only said that and he followed it up with, and you know what, to date, I haven't really decided to set any new bottom line, so it's probably going to happen next week too.
Yeah. See, he's copping to it. That's honest, and you would like that honesty. Like,
you would probably make a harder decision because you'd be like, oh, that doesn't work for me, but at least that would really be honest. Or he would come and say honestly, like, man, I'm realizing that I got a problem with Google Maps and it's so riddled into my habits that I'm probably going to have to do something different there. And here's a new bottom line that I'm setting because I want to get better.
Tyler, it's like the guy that relapses every week and comes to group or talks to his wife and is like, yeah, I'm horrible.
Guys, I got to check in.
It's better if he were to say, I love pornography and I want to look at it. And that's what I want to do versus continue to do that, but then say that he doesn't.
Yeah, it would be better for him to come to group that week and say, hey, guys, just a regular check-in. I haven't decided to get sober yet, so I'm here to get the support and practice honesty, but I'm not really willing to do what it takes yet to get sober.
I want my addiction. I love pornography.
I'm still deciding on that. That's at least honest.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the starting point.
Yeah.
So
rigorous honesty with self and accountability. Rachel, we've gotten into a bunch. We've kind of gone everywhere. I hope this was helpful for you.
Yeah, very.
Any last thoughts on your heart today?
No, I just am so grateful for your input and your wisdom. And yeah, I am encouraged. I feel like I have more tools for what to look for and think I'm on the right path. It's just so slow path.
I hear you on the right path. You're on the right path.
Yep, just understand what real recovery is. It's not about that sobriety. It's about what you've been asking us about today. Like I want to, I've heard it said before that you can just feel recovery. You just know it. And there are things you can look for, like the rigorous honesty and the proactivity and those type of things. But you'll sense it in him. And if you don't start sensing it, or if you start sensing the opposite of that, that's where you really got to kick into gear to protect yourself, your truths. And so, yeah, I think you'll do that, Rachel.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for coming on today. Thank you for coming and bringing yourself the way you did. It's a benefit to everyone who's listening right now. To our listeners, thank you for being here, listening, and hopefully supporting Rachel and what she's going through. And hopefully she's helped you today. And until next time, you guys, keep on keeping on.